That's what I have mentioned in some previous videos when some will say just willy-nilly that a company should be changing to a new engine. It just doesn't happen that quickly. Unless, of course, if you are a code developer, you just port thing over to something new. But again, you need to have the skills to do that. Okay, so I generally don't know how to start this video because I don't want to pull into the heartstrings of making people mad and angry, because we have enough of that right now in gaming discourse. But we kind of need to talk about this because we are dealing with some stuff that should straight up be illegal. Now, with the way that my brain works, I would like to talk about this in a story mode sort of fashion, because then I can keep everything concise and remember everything correctly. So, essentially 3 days ago, I had a conversation with two of my friends on the current state of gaming. Despite the many blunders and continuous pitfalls towards horrendous gaming practices, especially within the AAA industry, 2023 has been a very good year for gaming. While we were discussing the makeups of the various things that we appreciated a lot within the games that we got to play this year, some disagreement happened during the conversation, as there always is, and we actually ended up taking the conversation to a different degree where we involved two of our other friends, one that is a developer, or that is a programmer within a developing firm, and the other one being a hardware engineer. So yeah, it got very nerdy real quick. But I'm getting to a point here, one thing led to another, and we ended up discussing game engines. So I'm not trying to infantilize anything here, and because I know that you may know some of these definitions, but as it always turns out, sometimes when we discuss, especially game discourse, we tend to forget the origins and straight up definitions of certain things. So what is a game engine? Well, the term game engine kind of encompasses a lot of things. You can program something within JavaScript, anything from Snake to table tennis to, I don't know, a point-and-click game that farms cookies, and you will basically have a game engine. So overall, video game engines serve as a framework for your game development, over-encompassing every aspect such as graphics, audio, logic, AI, and so much more stuff. Now, all depending on your skills in coding, because yes, despite how noob-proof an engine may be, you'll still need to be able to write some code. So finding the adequate engine can be a lifesaver, saving you not only time in your development process, but especially cost. So usually when a developer wants to save cost, they will usually turn their gaze towards something that is open sourced, or in the least free, because having access to the source code does not make something open source. For this, we go all the way through something like RPG Maker, Open 3D Engine, Godot, or as it should be properly pronounced, Godot. And of course, most popular in recent years has been the Unreal Engine by Epic Games. Now, let's linger a little bit on this last one, Unreal, for this engine tends to get a bad rap, and that is mainly because some people tend to consider its nature to be rather bland in the presentation of certain very few games, as well as what tends to be a bit more of a focus towards the visual, not so much towards actually making gameplay fun. But personally, I actually don't think that that is true at all, because I can find you a plethora of games just last year that I played that were made on Unreal. Destroy All Humans, Hogwarts Legacy, Life is Strange, Sifu. I believe the Sifu came out last year, or was it just the year before? I actually can't remember. It's been a while since I played that, despite all of the updates. Even this year, we have such thing as the System Shock remake. King of Fighters, also believe that came out this year, 15, and also just a plethora of other game titles or demos that you may have tried, like the one that is to be releasing in a few days here, Lies of P. And sure, you can definitely find some games that have been a blunder that have been released on this engine, Golem, Callisto Protocol, Redfall. But this just to say that the equivocation of the engine being the thing that makes things bad and or just causes people to be lazy so that they make a product that basically just looks like an asset flip, it's not the case, right? It's up to the developer at times that the result of what you get is the way that it is. Not making excuses for it, it's
just the way it is now.
As an example, if I were to show you footage of this game here, and no, this is not me having modded Armored Core to make it look like a waifu simulator, nor with this one, you wouldn't be able to tell me what engine this is running on. Well, one is running on Unreal Engine, being here Demon X Machina, and the other one being Breakout 2 that is running on the Unity engine. So basically, you can make pretty similar looking games that also have somewhat of a similar gameplay function in different engines, so it depends on whatever the developer is doing. So if you are, let's say, an indie developer, choosing whatever engine you want to use, it basically just depends on your skill level, because at the end of the day, you might still be able to make something that is comparable to something that was made on a free engine or something that actually cost you. And this is a point that I bring forth again because the engine of today's topic has, just like its very popular counterpart Unreal, received a lot of, let's say, less than constructive feedback about how the developers using it are bad sometimes, are just lazy because they may be using the cheaper alternative, the non-paid version, basically boiling things down to a to-pay fallacy where you are rejecting good hair because it was not grown with keeps or something. Once again, you can make basically anything with any engine. It only requires you to be skilled and imaginative enough. But now, having covered the summary of our conversation on why it is that game engine tends to get a bad rap and why it is that the opinions of both the consumers, who tends to make the criticism, and the developers should be respected somewhat equally to a certain level, okay, depending on what topic we're talking about, this now brings us to Unity. Unlike how Epic has slowly become a fan favorite due to its free nature and how it has created a big fan following around it that has made a huge amount and variety of assets that are rather easy to use for developers, Unity as a company mostly has been the circle of a lot of controversies over the last few years, basically trying their best to kill the soul of gaming. And developers were very adamant at voicing their concerns about this, especially regarding the man sitting at the very top, the CEO, John Riccatello. For those of you who are unaware, the man was previously the CEO of Electronic Arts, living in or around the time where EA was being at the worst. Like back when people were comparing ex-EA CEO Andrew Wilson to Gabriel Kruger from Mirror's Edge Catalyst, they should have been comparing this guy to freaking Kafka. He single-handedly launched EA into more microtransactions, if you can possibly believe that, and wanted a strategy where in shooters you could monetize people reloading ammo.
What?
Now, let me make something very clear. We often hear a lot about game developers messing up. We often have the likes of Todd Howard telling us that the issues that we encounter during a game session is only due to our hardware just not being good enough. Todd can tell us sweet little lies, but we really know what is happening in the background, right? But one thing that is straight up vile is when one sociopath at the very top of the hierarchy is telling you that you're being for not wanting to add monetization within your game. As those of you who would follow some game news once in a while would have remembered from July last year, where the man in an interview with Pocket Gamer made quite the aloof comparison with car manufacturers and the gaming industry, saying that Ferrari and some of the other high-end car manufacturers still use clay and carving knives. It's a very small portion of the gaming industry that works that way, and some of these people are my favorite people in the world to fight with. They are the most beautiful and pure, brilliant people. They are also some of the biggest fucking idiots. This was in contrast to his desire of implementing monetization practices in the early process of game making, a practice that of course had seen a lot of pushback. But he was adamant that this was a method that should be embraced. Despite him trying to rectify his mistake by calling it something that was just taken straight out of context, all he ended up doing was just pouring more gasoline onto the fire, with developers all across the world just giving him a massive middle finger. Which begs the question on the terms of monetization: how does Unity make money?
Here comes the money!
Here we go.
Despite Unity's primary market being video games, they have other clienteles like architecture, design, engineering products, and film. Because yes, much like in Unreal, you can use Unity to create cinematic videos. While these of course would be used as an argument for desired growth by the company, when it comes to the revenue stream, we have to look at the subscription services. It used to be that Unity was free in that those whose product, let's say, games generated less than $800,000 a year year would not need to pay royalties nor subscription fees for either the game nor using the editor. And while this may sound pretty lucrative, this is a margin that after all has been pushed by companies like Epic Games, who have put this limit to $1 million, where afterwards you have to pay 5% of your revenues to the company. Now back to Unity. This is part of the Create solution, the subscription services and all. The Operate solution, however, is the part that is much more interesting for us, especially with regards to this current debacle, as the product in this ecosystem are the one that makes the most money from monetizations with ads. As the company has its own mobile ad platform and auction as a direct competitor to Google's equivalent in the mobile market, AdMob. Obviously, after the wishes of the greedy CEO, the company started pushing aggressively with these practices to the point where more than half of its revenue was generated with its Operate solution division. In other words, the ads. But the story gets much more infuriating if we backtrack a little bit and try to understand what happened earlier that year. In particular, in March 2022, when Unity announced Project Gigaya, a playable game sample built with Unity's own tools, with the purpose of giving new developers a living resource on start, so to finish game development. This would have been a nice thing, right? A nice pivot for the company to turn their gaze towards game development, the thing that they started with, and not just wanting to monetize things to hell. This would have additionally worked as a massive advertisement for the engine, since Unity still has the reputation of being that bad mobile engine that spits out bad games. And it would be nice if it wasn't for the fact that the project was cancelled via a forum post on the 14th of July 2022, a decision that was not so surprising because we are so very accustomed to a company having a no-warning layoff, which in the case of Unity was the higher-up firing 4% of the staff, only to be followed by a project cancellation. Objection by staff, developers and consumers alike was only met by a boiling point when in that very same month of July, Unity merged with ironSource. ironSource being an ad tech company that serves developers with tools of integrating ads, cross-channel marketing and different form of analytics tools. One that I guess they really needed at the time because there was talks about a 75% loss in revenue, at least on the side of Unity, and a 50% for ironSource up until that month in 2022. So the reason for the merger was driven by the economic downturn, but also there was the implication of Apple's ATT framework, but that's beside the point. Basically, during this media tour that he was going through answering questions to the media, he basically showcased how he wanted to change the Unity model onto something, let's say, akin to what YouTube has. Something where you have to constantly follow the algorithm to find what is more fine-tuned to your game, which necessarily isn't bad. But to be fair, even on this very platform that we like so much, we've seen in what direction this tends to make things go. In his own word here, it says that what if creators had engines for live game that by default enable them to gain early indicators of success through user acquisitions of the prototype and gave them a feedback loop to improve their games based on a real player interaction as early in the process as possible. I mean, fine. User-tested feedback is great, right? Everybody would like that. You would like to have the feedback to polish your game so that it is as good as possible. Take the example of Lyrian Game, who has spent the last 3 years through the open beta test, having people constantly giving feedback to have the game that is now released. That is nice, but what happens then when you actually are monetizing things from the get-go, from the prototypical state of your game? As an indie developer, it stinks. And what stinks even more is when the company with whom you are joining forces is best known for its malware delivery systems. So popular that its own entry in VirusTotal was blacklisted on Windows by Microsoft.
That smell, the kind of smelly smell. A smelly smell that smells smelly.
And that smell lingered for an entire year and finally revealed itself to be a massive turd this week. Like, everybody was complaining about it, but you know, CEOs don't give a shit. Well, in this case, of course, they turn great things into shit. Now, once again, in tandem with some Apple-related stuff, I believe that this was the Apple showcase on the 12th of September, they decided to release a blog post that pissed everybody off. This one dealing with the Unity plan pricing and packaging updates. An update to Unity's licensing plan that was planning to do the things that anybody who's been working for EA and just generally any big company that is adapting the SaaS model, which stands for Software as a Service, for those of you who may not know the abbreviation, has always tried to do, monetizing the hell out of everything. This time around, making the licensing even worse.
It can't get any worse.
Of course it can. Of course.
Something that they plan on setting in motion effectively in January 2024 with a new runtime fee that is based on game installs. This is the statement, right? We are introducing a Unity runtime fee that is based upon each time a qualifying game is downloaded by an end user. We choose this because each time a game is downloaded, the Unity runtime is also installed. Also, we believe that... Also, we believe that an initial install base fee allows creators to keep the ongoing financial gains from player engagement, unlike a revenue share. So let us unpack this. You have the Unity editor that you are being charged for, but also every single time that somebody is installing your game, there's extra cost into the mix. And the fees, my guys and girls, are insane. Now, there are tiers to this stuff, but the base level, the thing that is going to affect people the most, is that once your game reaches a 200k plus revenue, they start charging you a whopping 20 cents per installs. Guys, install based. And listen here, I know that my introduction may have sounded as if I was shilling for Epic and the Unreal Engine. I'm not, okay? There are a lot of practices that Epic does that don't sit right with me at all. But never, ever have I seen a company update in their policies and or services sounding so much like a scam and finding out that it's not. This is actually what is happening. This is 40,000 a year, right? 200k that you have to pay to Unity. And it gets worse, because we are talking about what they deem to be legitimate installs here. We don't know how it is that they are planning on verifying what is legitimate or not, because, you know, many have speculated that illegal downloads, and of course the would-be things that they were talking about last year, the prototype phase being the demos, also to count as installs. How do they plan on mitigating what is a legitimate install or not? And nobody knows. They came out with some poor excuse saying that they have their ways, basically telling you, trust me bro, I know what I'm doing. They have created a scenario here that is something akin to a Reddit troll post. Because the scenario that I'm talking about here is that of a single install. Imagine that you are an indie developer that just passed that threshold of 100k, that now has to apply to the subscription services and pay those subscription fees. Now, your game finally makes a profit somehow if you are one of the lucky ones, the outliers that actually makes profit after the game releases a month after. It's not typical at all, okay? So this is already like a rare case. But within that first month, let's say that you make those 200k. Suddenly, you are owing 20% of your profit to Unity. And this is only talking about a single install of your own game. Let us not even involve the fees that you have to pay to your publisher, as well as the distributor. What do you have to give to Steam on those 30% or Epic games? Like, there is a part of this conversation that initially could have been interpreted as being in good faith. Yeah, I know, good faith from the evil CEO. Yeah, well, if we're reading through the lines in the previous interview that I mentioned during the time of the acquisition, sorry, not an acquisition, it was a merger, he was urging developers to make use of the full set of tools that Unity would provide them with from the get-go to make sure that their game would be as profitable as possible. Basically urging developers to think about monetization during the creation process and not as an afterthought. Which again was a fair point within the mobile mobile market, because again, in contrast to Unreal that focused on traditional PC gaming, that was the niche market that Unity focused on for a long time. But with the move that the company made before and after this interview, it erased any chances of this in-context message to be taken charitably. It also really doesn't help that over the last 3 years, the company only has been engaging in share sales. At least according here to MarketBeat, that actually tracking further to just a few days before all of this was announced, we can see that John Riccatello and another one of the company's directors were offloading shares, with this director here selling more than 2/3 of her position within the company. Things like these can only push the narrative of you really don't give a damn about the little guy and you are just trying to make the quick profit to hightail it out of there. Oh hi, Future Jack here. So there's been a lot of things going on in my life in the last 3 days, one especially being my daughter's birthday, so content might be a little bit slow on the channel and yeah, basically I was busy, but this also gave me the opportunity to go through some of the stuff that I talked about in the previous recording of this video, and perhaps there are some intel that I will revise here and perhaps update to be a little bit deeper. But for the most part, I think that it's more or less just the fallout of what Unity, the company, is experiencing right now. That is a little bit different. But back to the point that I made just about this moment here, they do not care about the user anymore, especially since the company went public. It's an unfortunate thing that we so often observe with companies just deciding no longer to follow the strategy that they had in the beginning, because Unity was supposed to be that democratized engine that actually prioritized game development as the first thing. And while you could technically say that they still do, but with their focus on the mobile scene, it's very clear that they have zero care for those who are making most of the games that we are enjoying. Something that is undeniable when we are looking at the behavior of the CEO and especially a lot of the members in its board of directors. One of them especially being the head of ironSource, the company that Unity merged with, a Tomar Barziv, who has over the last year sold up to 20 million of Unity stock shares. A move that sounds even crazier when you're realizing that all of the goodwill that this company have is being tarnished at the moment. There's also 2 additional characters, because yes, it's much easier to treat them as characters as they seem to be like a play of evil here. One named Egon Durbin and the other being Roloff Botha. Both have been noted to be dumping their shares into Unity, have an history of involvement in some API raise schemes and or advisory schemes that led to such things as Elon Musk wanting to buy Twitter under the guise of making it profitable, which pissed everybody off and, well, did not make it profitable, and lo and behold, are both related to the PayPal mafia. I mean, I don't even know where to start with that. I don't even want to dive into that rabbit hole, but let's just say that once you are in a group that has something to do with the likes of Peter Thiel, Elon Musk is of course also involved, but goddamn, Peter Thiel, then you know that it's bad. But just this thing of reverting from a deal that they already had established, raising all of these API prices to crazy, and also just forcing people to pay 4 times the amount because the entry level subscription that you will have to pay, the runtime for the install of the editor for each user is now 4 times the original amount, since you now have to upgrade to the pro version to make it last. Like, it is insane that they even thought that this was going to be received well. And that's not even mentioning the possible threats from bad actors. How are they going to stop that? Again, nobody would know how install and reinstall would work. What would be checking that? What checks for what is charity given or a humble bundle? What would happen in those cases? Let's say that I would be one of the bad actors for a moment, okay? It's just a weird scenario that I'm thinking about right now. Let's say that I am mad at a developer who from the inside has seen their work being usurped by a third party. I'm talking about Zaum here, the people for whom's gameplay I'm most likely going to be splicing onto this video. The original creators pretty much had their game stolen by an inside man, something that has been documented by some YouTubers that I will leave in the description below. If I were to feel like, okay, you know what, I'm just going to go and uninstall and reinstall that game on different devices, I could do that. they would be charging that company so much money. Now, that is not right to do, but it's literally feasible. And this is just talking about the underdog, the people that seemingly don't really matter for Unity. What about the mobile business? Well, if you think that a golden cow is safe, it's not quite the case, because despite them having this incentive of not charging you too much if you're releasing a mobile game, a vast majority are still going to have a lot of costs that they need to cover over. Like I saw this post by Twitter user Sososowski that showed a chart of what you are going to pay for publishing your mobile game. And while the vast majority are within the green and the yellow zone, when you're getting past that orange line, and especially towards that black line there, you are basically screwed. That's where you actually have to pay them money for releasing a game onto the platform. And just the fact that it exists there, it's insane. But I just realized I was getting ahead of myself. How has Unity replied to any of this? Well, they did the corporate talk by first and foremost gaslighting everybody. For the first few days when people realized what was happening, they tried to explain it away by saying that none of the users and just a very small percentage of the developers will be affected by this. But after having been ratioed by just about everybody on the internet, like every single developers are roasting them to hell, with especially those who made it big in the last few years threatening to leave, with the likes of the Cult of the Lamb developer who have made this amazing game. It's very good, but they are even better at ratioing people on Twitter, making this post here. But after this being done and Unity closing 2 of their offices due to death threats, and no, this is not a thing where like some angry fans decided to go ahead and threaten people. This actually came from within. Yes, workers are pretty fed up with this as well, because the voices went unheard. So naturally, Unity did the way too common thing of issuing a Twitter apology, with OperaGX of course being the first to ratio them. Gotta like them. OperaGX is great with this. What are they saying there? We have heard you. They haven't. We apologize for the confusion and angst the runtime fee policy we've announced on Tuesday caused. No, there was no confusion, no angst. Everybody acknowledged what you were saying. They're just telling you to walk it back. We are listening, talking to our team members, community, customers, and partners, and will be making changes to the policy. We will share an update in a couple of days. Thank you for your honest and critical feedback. And we have the likes of Jacksepticeye here saying the one thing that I think that most people are imagining will happen. Taking bets here. Do they double down and make it way worse, or actually revert some changes and save the day? I don't see them, like, they don't have any other choice but to revert in this, because that's the only thing that developers and users are going to accept, because who the hell would want to go back? Oh, we even have Zach here, Asmongold, saying that you're not going to get off this like some bullshit video game apology with weak-willed gamer nerds. And you know what, he's not wrong when he says weak-willed gamer nerds, because yeah, sometimes we tend to just let things slide. People need to build a future with a design engine, and the trust is already broken. No one's going to build a castle on sand after your bullshit. Now, the funny thing is, while they were formulating their half-assed Twitter apology, other companies were already making their moves, with collective letters from development companies hitting them where it hurts by turning off the ironSource and Unity ads monetization from their devices and services. And some of the studios that had been long-time users that have the means for doing it already made the move by migrating to a new engine. Godot, I was about to say Godot again, but Godot made Humble bundles with packs that are now available for people who are deciding to migrate to their engine so that they can learn how to deal with it. Like, it's incredible that other parties were quicker at responding in an adequate way than Unity was. This brings us back full circle to the start of the video, because we are most likely going to see a lot of people now trying to migrate to a new engine, and that despite the fact that Unity may be reverting to these policies and or actually acknowledging what they're being criticized for. But the thing is this, right? I know that most engine now are like able to compensate for a lot of things that they couldn't a few years back, and perhaps the C# feature that Unity provided to many people isn't that much of an issue anymore. But still, you will have to set aside a lot of time and resources for you to relearn a new engine, and that is costly. That's the part that some people may not be thinking about, and that's what I have mentioned in some previous videos when some will say just willy-nilly that a company should be changing to a new engine. It just doesn't happen that quickly, unless of course if you are a good developer, you just port thing over to something new. But again, you need to have the skills to do that. But yes, we are most likely going to be seeing people doing that, either migrating to Unreal or Godot, which is wonderful because that one is both free and open source, so you don't need to worry much about the fees or royalties that need to be paid. The thing is this, right? For the most part, if you are the average gamer, this is not something that you would even come across. That's like a general thing actually. When we usually have these discussions about what is ruining the gaming industry, we are already beyond the average gamer level. Most gamers don't care about this. They just get that dopamine fix from a certain game. If it feels good, that's just good. They make the fun out of whatever they have. The economics and the inner workings of a company does not mean much to them. But that is totally fine. But it is still important for you to know the source of the issues sometime. Because often we start blaming a studio from starting to act in a weird way, and we actually don't know what's going on in the background, when in reality we are just dealing with asshole CEOs or board of director members that, like, it's very typical, only care about whatever revenue they can scramble from a company and just leave suddenly. But I'm very interested in knowing what is going to happen with Unity, because I'm pretty damn sure that you're going to see a lot more tutorials on how to actually program a game and not just make some awesome visuals within a certain game engine in the next few days. That's going to be interesting. But folks, this has been it for me covering this crazy story. If you have any details that you would like to share in the comment section below, please do that. And that said though, wanted just to inform you a little bit about that and kind of make you aware. I bet that, well, if Asmongold has covered this, it's hot. So yeah, that said though, we should have a wonderful day still, and yeah, support whatever creator that you know in good faith that has a Unity game. I know that Bellular Games have that the Pale Beyond that they really I never played it, but perhaps I should give it a go. But yeah, anyways, if you can do any of that, please do that, and have a good one. See ya.